David was a host of a mystery dinner night. There were lots of nods to Hitchcock movies scattered around the house, and there would be a murder, not real of course, happen, and the guests were to find out which person in the house was the killer. There were 4 guests, 2 men and 2 women. The man that was putting on the event said to the guests, "Hello, my name is David, and I have rented out this luxurious old house to hold what was to be a very exciting and thrilling night. There will be tributes throughout the house that pay tribute to different movies from Hitchcock, and you will be able to maybe put 2 and 2 together with different clues left around the house as to who the murderer is. We will be starting the night with a brief introduction by the man himself, who is played by the winner to play the role of Alfred Hitchcock, who is Eugene, who I must say strikes an uncanny resemblance to Alfred Hitchcock himself. I had auditions from lots and lots of different people, but I'm sure Eugene will play the role of Mr. Hitchcock perfectly himself. I must let you know that Eugene, or should I say Alfred, knows who the killer is, so maybe you can try to play friends with him to try to get information out of him. He isn't going to spill the beans, of course, but you never know. If you're that clever, you might be able to get information out of him that he doesn't even realize he is giving. From here, friends, I introduce you to Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. Eugene stood in front of the 2 men and 2 women. They were very surprised by how Eugene had looked like Alfred Hitchcock. He spoke. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this amazing Alfred Hitchcock mystery murder night. We will start the night with a very tasty meal, and things will get very exciting very soon. You will be able to find clues and different items around the house that will have a link to different movies from me, and they might be a link to the murder, or maybe not. It is for you to decide. Enjoy the evening, everyone." Both couples sat down and enjoyed their meal. It took them about an hour to have the starter and main course and dessert gone. Right then, Alfred came out again and said, "Okay everyone, explore the house, find the body, and solve the murder. And as ye know, before even coming here, the winner will win £10,000. And I know ye are 2 couples, so ye can have that money if ye so choose with your partner. Good luck everyone." Both couples walked around the house. One couple was Matt and Susie. They entered a room with a curtain and a rope hanging on the wall, and both realized it was a reference to Hitchcock movies, The Rope and Torn Curtain. But there was no body, so they didn't see any other relevance to it. The other couple were Sharon and Michael. They entered a room where there was a wheelchair and a camera by the window. Instantly, they knew it was a reference to Rear Window. They were expecting to see a shower with blood on it as a reference to Psycho somewhere in the house, but Mr. Hitchcock's most known movie, Psycho, was nowhere to be found. There was a person walked into the room and the couple jumped. It was a man who said, "Hello sir and madame, I am the butler in this house. If you would like me to assist ye in any way, please just ring the bell that is placed in the hall by the telephone." A woman had entered the room, and when she saw them, walked back out. A few minutes later, they heard a scream from the window and ran over to look. To their surprise, they had seen the woman who had just been in the room earlier had ran away from a body. The shock came to them when they had told Alfred, and he had looked with shock, knowing that wasn't the fake murder planned for their mystery murder night. When they went down to investigate, they both realized that the dead body was actually real. The body was of the butler. A couple of minutes later, Eugene rang David, and David rushed outside. He looked shocked. Michael told him that it was a woman who had murdered the man. They saw her running away. David froze and said, "I know who the killer was." They all looked shocked and asked who. He took out a knife and stabbed the couple, and turned to Eugene. "Mr. Hitchcock, do you think I would forget a reference to your movie Psycho? Let me introduce you to my character. My name is Norman Bates. Now you can leave, as I don't want to hurt you, but just to let you know how well I planned the twist. The killer was Mother." Eugene ran and ran, knowing that the host of the party was a real killer, believing he was Norman Bates, and also was dressed up as his mother, who was the woman who killed the butler and couple. A few minutes later, after Eugene rang the police, they arrived to see the other couple dead in a room full of birds eating them. Jason was a kleptomaniac since as long back as he could remember. Ever since he could steal, he would. He remembers his mom used to get so mad at him when he was a small kid for stealing different items from his peers at school. His mother didn't experience anything else bad about his behaviour apart from the stealing, although there was one very distressing experience his little brother had when they were both small. They were in the woods and Jason stole his father's gun, and there was a dog that seemed lost. Jason used the gun to shoot the dog dead, and his brother started crying, but Jason just started laughing and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." Jason's brother Simon told his mom Susan, and she grounded Jason for almost a month. But when it came to stealing, he wasn't in the need for anything. He just had the impulse to steal as much as he could, and as often as he could. If he was inside a restaurant, he would steal the knife and fork, and sometimes even plate, even though he had many more at home that he stole. He was caught a few times, and even spent a few months behind bars when he was 21. He had counselling to try to stop his impulses to steal, but nothing worked. He kept stealing as much and often as he could. One time, he even stole from his own best friend. They were out for a drive. Jason's friend Jack stopped at a gas station to fill up. While his friend was inside paying, Jason stole his friend's phone and put it in a secret pocket in his bag. No one could find it there. As they were driving up a lonely road, they knew that they were in the back of the Beyonds, and there was no GPS in the car, so they were lost. Jack regretted driving so much out into the outback. Suddenly he was startled as a dog stood right in front of the car. The car swerved and crashed right into a tree. Jason got a flashback of years and years and years before when he shot the dog out in the woods. Jason was knocked unconscious and was in a very bad way. Jack tried to get his phone from where he left it on the car's dashboard, but could not find it. Jason was bleeding very badly and could not speak. Jason knew Jack's phone was in his secret pocket, but he could not manage to get the words out. Jack kept looking for his phone to call 911, knowing the paramedics would have to come in at least 5 or 10 minutes at most, or else he would be gone. He knew it was too late when he saw Jason go pale and the blood began to pour out of him even more. Jason died knowing his stealing finally caught up with him. Joseph moved in with his wife Lisa to a house in a secluded area, but that suited him fine. They came from the big bright lights of New York City and wanted to move away from the hectic city lifestyle. At first, Joseph and his wife hated the quietness and stillness of the area. After a few weeks, Joseph found himself going crazy when he was trying to go to sleep at night with the sound of the waterfall nearby. It haunted him, and when he eventually did fall asleep, he dreamt of stormy weather or the waterfall while he was drowning in it. His wife seemed to just sleep through the night, and it never bothered her, no matter how loud or annoying it got. He wished he had earplugs, but couldn't believe they would do any good, as the sound was so loud. It was driving him crazy. The next day when he got up, he just sat down, nearly falling asleep in front of the TV, because he couldn't get no sleep at night. One night it was different. It was almost like the waterfall was calling his name to come to it. The sound felt much different. It was like music to his ears. It was like the complete opposite of what it was like before. He was smiling at how appetizing the sound seemed to be. He got up from bed and got dressed and walked towards the waterfall. The noise of it was like beautiful, relaxing, soothing music to his ears. Then suddenly he saw the most beautiful lady. He remembered then. How could he forget? She was just standing next to the waterfall, waiting for him to embrace her, and that is just what he was going to do. Before he saw her skin colour change, and then he had realised the horror and what he kept locked away in a box in his mind and never wanted to open again. His wife had drowned in the waterfall a week ago, and he did everything he could to help her, but he just couldn't save her. He then realised who was the woman up in the house with him. Then he realised, of course, there was no woman up in the house with him. It was just his mind and the waterfall playing tricks with him. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Stephanie had schizophrenia and could see things that weren't really there. It could happen her anywhere. She really believed the things she saw were real, which was when she first saw and heard a baby cry next door. She wondered, was she just imagining things? But what really made her paranoid was last week she saw her next door neighbour, Sarah, look around when she came out of her car to see was anyone looking, and she was holding a baby. She knew what she saw, but even though she saw that, she first thought maybe she had imagined the whole thing until she heard the baby cry a few more nights. She told her parents, but they didn't want to know. Her dad just told her that she was imagining it all, and if she went to the police about her next door neighbour kidnapping a baby, then she would be put away. They would say that her hallucinations are causing other people harm and could cause herself harm. Stephanie didn't know what to do, but she knew what she saw and knew it wasn't just one of her imaginations. She said to her mom, "Mom, we need to call the police and get them to go to that woman's house because she definitely is hiding a baby in there. You know she told us many times she is living alone, and why would she say that if she had a baby? Plus, if she is babysitting a baby and if it's all legit, then the police will know and she won't get into trouble, but we can't just keep quiet and do nothing." Stephanie's mom Greta said, "Sweetie, you have seen so many different monsters and demons and whatever else that aren't there. This is just another one of those." Stephanie said, "Please, Mom, just go over and ask the lady is there a baby with her and who does it belong to." Her mom sighed and told her to get some sleep. The next day, Stephanie came into her kitchen for her breakfast and said to her dad, "Where's Mom?" Her dad said, "I tried to stop her. She's actually gone over to our neighbor's house confronting her about your wild accusations that obviously are not true." Stephanie ran out the door before he could say anything else. She ran over to her neighbor's house and broke a window, then climbed in. When she was in the room, her mom was standing next to her neighbor, who was pointing a gun at her, and she turned to look at Stephanie and said, Well, look who has joined the party. Your mom here asked me whose baby I had in my house. Well, it's your damn father's baby. He decided to knock me up and didn't tell me keep the baby quiet because people will only start talking. Now I can't have anything come between me and your dad. You see, he loves me way more than you and your mom." Suddenly, Stephanie's mom ran and tried to grab the gun out of the woman's hand, and then the gun went off. They both looked at the door to see it was her dad who was just entering the room. He fell down on the ground as the bullet hit him. He looked up at his wife and said, before dying, "What? Why?" Stephanie's mom still had the gun in her hand and shot the woman who was running at her with a knife. Stephanie said, "Mom, tell the police it was me. I have schizophrenia. They will let me off." Stephanie's mom said, "No, I did this. I will tell the truth." A few minutes later, the police arrived, and a police officer said, "Police, is there anyone else in the house?" Stephanie said, "That woman tried to kill us, and she shot my dad." The police officer looked at Stephanie's mom and said, "I'm afraid you have to come to the police station with me." Stephanie said, "Not her, the other woman." The police officer said, "What other woman?" Stephanie's mom was smiling, in a daze, talking to herself. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you enjoy the content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new content.
We had heard about the sickness for weeks. Rumors of people dropping in the streets, being run over by carriages and left to rot. No one would touch them for fear of being infected. In just hours, whole villages were seeing symptoms, hundreds dead in days. I lived in a small farming village with my mother and father. We were secluded where we lived. There were only 4 houses spread over 20 miles. People from the cities would drift by on their way to safety and tell us what they'd heard about the fever. But no one else came after a while. Not even the mailman. A week, a month, 2 months passed, and we hadn't seen a soul. My father and mother decided to leave, but I told them I couldn't come. The family that lived on the last farm east was very dear to us, and they had small children. I told my mother I would go to see if they were okay and ask if they would come with me. After that, I would follow my parents south to where my aunt lived. Mother cried, but I would not be swayed. I watched them leave as the sun rose over the dirt road. I had a 20-mile walk in front of me, and so I began. There are those who doubt my story after this point. Some say I'm simply lying. Others speculate I had the fever, and what I saw was only in my mind. I know I wasn't sick. I wish it was all a terrible hallucination, but I know what happened was real. It is midnight on the 3rd of November, 1723. I am a condemned woman. I am scheduled to be hanged in the morning. I have no reasons left to lie. This document will be seen only after I'm dead. Let this be my last testament. As I walked the path, I noticed a distinct silence in the trees. Sounds I had heard all my life were simply gone. And then I heard her. She was coming down the path. A smile arched across her face. She moved lightly, almost skipping. Not a care in the world. A large crimson stain sat dark at the frayed neck of her dress. Blood. "Are you okay, miss?" I asked as she passed by. It wasn't until she was only inches from me that I recognized her. The look in her eyes and that terrible smile made it hard for me to notice at first, but now I could see it was Mrs. Shannon. She lived on the farm closest to ours. She had never been one to smile. She didn't look at me when I talked to her, only continued to sing. I assumed then that she had the illness and her mind was gone. I watched her for a few minutes and then turned and kept going. After about a minute, I looked back. She stood about 100 yards away with her back to me. Her head was turned sideways, listening. I ran the rest of the way. I arrived at the house just as the sun began to set. I knew something was wrong as soon as I laid my eyes on it. There were no cows in the pasture, no goats. I jogged to the front door and knocked. Nothing inside moved. Flies buzzed in the kitchen where dirty dishes sat out exposed. Maggots slithered on the plates, finishing what was left of a week-old dinner. A trail of blood led to the back of the house where the bedrooms were. I moved slowly. The smell was even worse here. Mr. Peters lay on the floor beside the bed. His neck was torn and blood had pooled black beneath him. He'd been dead for days. Something moved in the closet. I hadn't seen the children. I had to check. Though I have to admit at this point I was terrified. I tried to keep quiet as I opened the door. It was the eldest, James. He was cowering in the corner. I took him to his room and gave him some of the water and food I had brought. I asked him what happened. He told me the whole story. A few weeks ago, a drifter had come to town with a fever. Mrs. Shannon let him stay in her barn. He told her it wasn't the illness that made him sick now, but that he had been attacked by a vampire on the road. She thought he was delirious. After he died, she and her husband buried him in the cemetery. A few days later, Mr. Shannon told his wife he had seen the man outside. The drifter said he needed his shoes. They had fallen off while they were transporting his body. After a few moments, the man left. For the next few days, they were plagued by knocks at their door during the night. One of these nights, Mr. Shannon had enough. He went out with his gun and told the man he would shoot him if he didn't go. The man began to laugh hysterically. Mrs. Shannon didn't see what happened, but when morning came, she went out and saw her husband dead on the ground. James told me that a few days prior to my arriving, Mrs. Shannon came asking for help. She said her husband had crawled out of his grave and was trying to get into the house. James's parents turned her away, thinking she was either sick or telling the truth. Either way, they were too scared to open the door. Mrs. Shannon returned not long after. That big grin, those wild eyes, she smelled of rot. She would come in the night, sing songs outside their windows. He told me his 8-year-old sister Elizabeth was the first to die. For reasons no one could understand, she had gone out of bed just before dawn and walked outside. He remembers having dreamt of a girl screaming for help. When he awoke, he realized the sounds were real. They found her a few hours later, sitting against a tree, a few yards into the woods. All the joints in her body had been twisted the wrong way. Before they buried her, his father bound her broken wrists with a rope and salted the earth above her. After a few days of hiding in the house, they ran out of supplies and decided to leave. His mother was killed while trying to gather goats. James and his father took their guns and searched the woods for the vampire, but there was no sign of it. They left her body where it fell and followed the road north. When night came, they found themselves surrounded. They would hear laughter coming from the forest and running feet cutting across the path behind them. James swears he heard his mother calling for him to come into the woods. In a panic, they headed back to the house. His father was briefly attacked along the way, and by the time they got inside, he was just barely breathing. I asked James if he knew who it was that had killed his father, and he told me it was his sister, 6 days after she died. In the end, I decided it didn't matter if it was true or not. James was weak and needed help. There were still usable supplies at my house. We had to leave. It's safer in the day, he told me. He wouldn't budge. He wouldn't let me bury his father either, but at least he let me put the body outside. The silence was still palpable. There were no crickets, not even a gust of wind to make me feel better. It was as if someone had taken our little village and cut it out from the rest of the world. Before I went back inside, I scanned the tree line expecting to see only darkness. There was a small purple dress obscured by low branches near the edge of the forest. At first I was elated. I could tell it was Elizabeth. She was caked in dirt. I thought because she had gotten lost in the woods and finally found her way out. I took a few steps toward her. She returned the favor and started walking to me. Her bones were all broken. She limped across the road like a puppet on strings. Each step she took would tear a new piece of flesh or crack another bit of bone. With absolute horror, I studied her face. She only smiled and held out her arms to me, wrists still bound. I ran back inside. James and I barricaded ourselves in the back bedroom and waited. I turned the lantern down to just barely a spark. We sat in the dark and listened. We heard his mother calling outside. James, Mommy's waiting. I could see the tears dripping down his cheeks. Elizabeth put her eyes between the cracks in the wood. Don't you miss us, brother? James begged her to leave. She said she would, but first she had to tell him something. He leaned in near the wall and she whispered in his ear. Then she left as promised. James sat without saying a word. He picked up the lantern and raised the flame. I asked if he was okay. He opened the globe and poured the oil down his throat. In seconds, he was covered in flames. I screamed. I wanted to help him, but there was no way. The room was overcome in just moments. I rushed to escape. Smoke filled every inch of the space. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. By the time I stumbled outside, it was almost dawn. I was so overcome by the smoke in my lungs that I lost consciousness. When I awoke, there was nothing left of the house or of James. A gash ran across my wrist. I had lost a lot of blood in the night, but I could still move. I tore a piece of my dress and wrapped the wound. When I could walk, I wandered north towards the closest town. Somewhere along the way, I heard the light and ringing of a tiny bell. I came across a cemetery and saw that the bell I was hearing was from a grave. Someone inside was pulling it, as if to say they had been buried alive. I walked to it, and as I did, another bell began to ring. Then another and another. I ran and never looked back. I thought I'd hurt my wrist while leaving the house, but now I realize that while I was unconscious lying on the grass, they fed. In a few hours, I'll be put to death for something I did not do. The people here think themselves civilized. They don't believe in monsters. I tried to warn them, but they won't listen, won't take precautions. They'll bury me tonight, and tomorrow morning, I'll be ringing my own bell.
Dig deeper at sessionsx.tumblr.com.